Hello, sir.
How's it going?
Good, thank God. Thank you for delaying by a minute.
No problem.
Was needed. I was on dinner duty.
Yeah.
So,
I'm on lunch duty, so it's like we're slightly off, but not that much.
all right, I got you. How you didn't have any storms by you, right? I heard America was had a little craziness going on.
It's a little stormy here. It's not stormy. It's just freezing. So like Austin is. Yeah, it's freezing over here.
What does that mean? Because for an Israeli, maybe it gets
Right.
to, let's say, 23, right? Or 32.
Yeah. So two things. One is very hard to heat the house. At least the house that I'm in Austin, and I think in Austin in general, the houses are harder. They're not made to retain heat. They're made to exude it, so expel it. So it's harder to do that. So it's really hot in the house too. It takes a lot on the furnace to keep it warm. And then also the roads today was there was a little bit of precipitation, so the roads are icy. So it's
Shalom.
dangerous to
Shalom, cool kid, Kirk.
What chapter are we on?
We are starting the 5th chapter.
It's not bad weather where I'm at, but it is MLK Day, so school's out.
School's out, so that means you had an opportunity to go downstairs this morning to your parents and say, like, hey guys, thanks for everything you do. Can I assist in the house with anything before I just do my thing?
I did some picking up, but probably more. I could have done more.
So after this class, your chance is to take the things you learn over here and remember to appreciate your immediate makers, your parents, and assist them a little in the house. No pressure, but some pressure. Unfortunately, I don't know, Ben, if you know about the news that happened in Israel today.
This stream, can we not try not to too much politics about that?
Did we have a lot of politics last stream? We generally don't talk about any politics. My only point is that we are learning in the name of and on behalf of the wounded people, and we hope they have a speedy recovery, of course. And same goes for all the soldiers, that they'll be safe, and of course, any innocent civilians in Gaza, them as well.
Well, Jews, but not Palestinians. I mean,
yes, that's what I meant. The people in Gaza, Palestinian people in Gaza, the innocent ones.
Cool. So this is the fourth one I have here. This is the last one that we learned on the 4th chapter.
Right. This was like an intense one that we went through. That we know that fear not. God is the judge, jury. He knows all the ins and outs. Don't assume that you could switch between you could get credit for good deeds over bad deeds. They each have their own separate accounting. We said about how much little free will we have in a certain perspective, because so much is sort of thrusted upon us, and in the little room we have, that's like sort of where we have to make the difference. Of course, this is happening. This was following other Mishnah we learned about preparing yourself in the foyer and getting ready for the world to come. So while it's true that Judaism doesn't deal a lot with the afterlife, and we don't walk around doing these calculations, where we are reading about it, it lets us know that we should be aware that it exists. We should be aware that that's like the real deal ultimately. Having said that, it's all about practicing it here in the real world. The tensions are in the real world. The place where you could grow is from that tension point, right? You can't grow from like zero. You have to have some sort of current going through it to allow you to move on to the next stage. And so let's move on to the 5th parak. What do we have in store for us today?
So you're going to read in Hebrew and then I'm going to read in English?
If you'd like, that's totally fine. Okay. Can you scroll down for a second? I just want to see the other ones after this. Basar Marot, Asara Dorot, and Asara. Okay, fine. Yeah. You can scroll back up. This parak is not really written by specific people like we had up until now, Hu Haya Omer, or giving names based on specific rabbis or sages. These are general comments, ideas, philosophies that were sort of grouped together, and specifically where we have them as like numbered grouping, right? So we have 10, 10, 10. I think there's another 10, there's a 7, there's a 4. So the whole fifth parak is sort of built around like these groupings of numbers of sentences and ideas that come to teach us obviously more deep truths about the world that we'll get into in a moment. So let's
if I may ask,
sure.
do you have a specific favorite Mishnaic rabbi, or like you seem to love Rabbi Akiva a lot?
You gotta love Rabbi Akiva because he's like one of the heaviest hitters. Like he's like the Mark Zuckerberg of that time, really taking Torah to like a new level with regards to creating a system, the different schools he opened up. So he really was having a whole network sort of unleashed during Rabbi Akiva's period. His methodology and thought process and the way he went about interpreting texts down to the level of the shape of the letter, which we've discussed in the past. There were tensions, obviously, others like Rabbi Yishmael that didn't agree with that, but that allowed for a whole new level of Torah learning, right? Which again brings in the pardes, brings in all those different elements. So he was a fascinating figure. The fact that he also went through his own fractal pattern reoccurrence of what happened to Jacob and the forefathers. The fact that he marries a Rachel and works for double the amount of time and starts off as less religiously connected, and it comes out being like just like Jacob is the father.
Isn't there?
Sorry, go ahead. Yep.
There's a tradition, I believe, that Rabbi Akiva was a convert.
There are traditions like that. There are traditions that he already from the age of 40, he really wanted to learn. So it shows like a lot of perseverance. It shows coming getting all the way to the top, and not necessarily doing that through, let's say, the way the Hasmoneans did it, through, let's say, corrupt politics, or let's say through a specific priestly lineage. So it's a fascinating character. I'll just say one more comment about him. He believed in Bar Kochva. He obviously realized that once he died, he was no longer the Messiah, as Maimonides mentions as well. But the fact that he reached out to believe, he was trying to manifest the Torah and its values on the ground. We could even see that in specific coins he had. He believed that with regards to the holiday of Sukkot, we have the 4 different types of
the Arba Minim.
Exactly. We have the Arba Minim. And according to him, according to some of the opinions, it's one of each. Most opinions, and what we ended up doing, lahalacha, the way we practice it today, is you have X amount of the Hadassim and you have X amount of the Aravot. However, on a coin that you see is from the time of Bar Kochva, who the Bar Kochva resistance, their spiritual leader and guide was Rabbi Akiva, the minted coins that they have are marked with the Arba Minim, but according to the halachic opinion of Rabbi Akiva. So it's just they're like historically
only one of each species.
Yeah, one of each species, exactly. But that is a little tidbit. So I would say, is that my favorite? He is definitely one that I really like. I like Elisha ben Avuya just because he's like a fascinating character, obviously, and the drama.
Rabbi Hillel was quite interesting.
Rabbi Hillel for sure. All the greats. You could collect them all.
They were all
brilliant.
They were all brilliant.
We should have like a series when you talk to their teachers, and the teacher's like, he wasn't so brilliant. Let me tell you something right now.
Okay.
Hillel would always walk into the class without shoes. Never had shoes on. Okay. בעשרה מאמרות נברא העולם. ומה תלמוד לומר, והלא במאמר אחד יכול להיברות, אלא להיפרע מן הרשעים שמאבדים את העולם שנברא בעשרה מאמרות, וליתן שכר טוב לצדיקים שמקיימים את העולם שנברא בעשרה מאמרות. Go ahead.
The world was created with 10 utterances. What does this come to teach us? Certainly, it could have been created with single utterance. However, this is in order to make the wicked accountable for destroying a world that was created with 10 utterances, and to reward the righteous for sustaining a world that was created with 10 utterances. So there is an idea, to my understanding, in the Gemara in Sanhedrin that anyone who kills a life is as if he killed the whole world, and anyone who sustains life is as if he sustained the whole world.
Right. Are you saying that I was showing how the righteous like sustain the whole world? Correct. Okay, so that'll be a good example where you see that echoed again. Generally speaking, we're taking like this is sort of taking like many different things, like the last 4 chapters, for example, and then like trying to bring them in and grouping them into one general idea. So here we have the famous 10 mamara, the 10 utterances, which, just as far as the number 10 again, mamarot are really more than God's utterances, is God's will, right? God's will be done in a certain sense. What he says is what he wants to happen. And I think we might have discussed this in the past, Ben, with regards to the number 10, right? It being the largest number in Hebrew. Like you always add another 10, right? It's like, it's always you're adding on another 10. Even when you get to 1,000, it's Aleph, which even the spelling of it is Aleph again. Mm-hmm. The number 10 can also be Osher, which means like abundance or wealth. So again, to show like a lot. Yeah. And what I like the most from a symbolic point of view is the fact that the number 10 in Gematria is the letter Yud, right? Mm-hmm. The 10th letter of the alphabet. And Yud is a point, right? So you have the number 10, which comes to show multiplicity, right? In unity, in the single point that's one, right? So again, in a certain way, it's also like reminiscent of God himself, right? All these, the 10 spheres of the Kabbalah. So we don't have to go down that line, but needless to say, 10 is a very important number. With regards to the 10 utterances of God creating the earth and the whole creation story, there's a famous discussion with regards to, but it's really 9 utterances plus the concept of Bereshit, right? Mm-hmm. The word of Bereshit, Genesis. So it's 9 plus 1. And in that sense, like the Bereshit utterance is like it's encompassing the entire potential of the whole creation. That's like the first utterance. And then the other utterances are more specific, which actualize like the different aspects of the world itself. And again, just with regards to the utterances, we could ask, like, why don't we have 10? Like, why don't we start with Vayomar, and he said, and God said? Because at the first utterance, there's no one to even hear, right? There's nothing. So there's no one to talk to. There's just creating from, the tohu and making. And then according to some shita, I'm not saying that there was something beforehand. We don't have to get into that too deep. The idea is that God is starting from Bereshit. And it's coming to show, again, there is, in a certain sense, we can't see God directly, right? There's sort of like 10 different veils, 10 different spheres, 10 different levels of interaction. And again, that's echoed, of course, in the 10 commandments, when like we have different commandments that again allow us to pierce that veil in a certain aspect and be able to see God and reach God as well.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
Question in terms of I don't know if it's I don't understand how one follows the other. Maybe I'm missing something, but it says Ella, or in order to. Why did it need to have? Why would one utterance not make the wicked accountable, and the righteous rewarded, right, and 10 would?
So what are we asking with like why not in one, right? Like if we say that the utterances include like a lot of details, isn't one utterance enough to include all the details? Why is it broken down to many different things? That's what the Mishnah is asking.
Right.
And then we say the reason they're doing this is, right, because we want to be focusing on the evil, on the wicked that destroy the world through 10 utterances, and the good that sustain the world in 10 utterances. So here it goes back to that question, why in one? In a certain sense, the details is showing that God takes interest in the small details, us being those small details.
Yeah.
Right.
So like,
Sorry, go ahead, Kirk.
so like the idea is that it increases the sanctity of everything in the universe.
Well, it shows that at the very least, God is interested in all these little details in the universe. However, because it's happening throughout these, let's say, symbolic 10 utterances, in a certain sense, it's leaving space for voids, for not mistakes, but for tension points, like we were talking about earlier. And
right, it's like levels of, instead of everything being destroyed in one go,
exactly,
there's levels of transgression.
Right. So I'm giving, in a certain sense, I'm giving more options for the good to do good deeds, and I'm giving and the lack of that, like we said, God create yotzera ta'oru bareh ta'choshech, right? He directly creates the light, indirectly creates the dark. So here too, we have
right. So this is redundancy. I mean, to put it in a system thinking kind of way.
Well, it's free will. Deal with it as you will. Right? Like you human, you could decide to now realize the 10 stages over here and try to interact with each one. You could also utilize this space to take on more wicked things to do, more evil things to do in this world. And I guess it's karma in a certain sense also, which is it's not what's on the scale. We are the scale itself. And in that sense, like chesed or mercy, grace, is the time God gives us on this earth, which is going back to the foyer. Like the gift is you have time to play in the free will land. And in that place, you'll have opportunities to do great things. You also have opportunities to do the lack thereof. But let's say like Socrates that was saying, why punish the wicked? You know, the fact that he's wicked is like punishment enough. And we're in a certain sense, like we're saying that if you recall that Mishnah we learned about Hillel, that he saw this head floating, the skull floating in the water.
Right, that's the Aramaic one, yeah.
Right, and I gave you this context of there was this Hasmonean king that was assassinated, so maybe they were talking about that, but more specifically, Hillel was saying at that point, if you interact with violence and that's your life, you're going to end up being killed.
Right.
So here too, it's if you are going to spend your time dealing with the evil stuff, then the 10 utterances could very quickly turn into 10 different levels of hell that you'll bring yourself into, because that is now the life you're building yourself. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kirk, you're good?
Yeah, it makes sense. The idea that you're creating nuance for behavior. Like one can be really bad, which would be like 10 good, or like 9 or 8 or 7, and there's an entire spectrum, and vice versa.
Yeah, and it's intricacy, or it's like the challah. It's like woven, like it's the details that make it special. It's like
right, woven. which is why it's not in one utterance. Right? God is certain saying, like, we could ask ourselves when it says and it was good, like what does that mean? God created it. It's more than good. It's perfection. Right? But we see God himself has given room in a certain sense for the free will. Not to say that, like, obviously we can't speak about these terms, like we can't speak about God in these terms, but in a certain sense, there's like beauty in the eye of the beholder, right? God is taking a step back and looking and being like, is it good? It is good. Yeah. And like there was sense where there was room for it to sort of interact by itself, and for God to take a step back and look at it and observe it. And we are all being observed that way.
I like the analogy that I heard about God being like imagine like an expert that gives a talk about something, needs to give a presentation about something. If that expert, obviously this expert, let's see, this is an expert on the stock market, he would be able to give you all the information in one go, just like 2 hours straight. He would give you all the information he has, just download onto you, like just give you a straight up presentation. You probably in 2 hours, it will be too much for you. Like you wouldn't be able to take it. So that's why you would, you have, okay, lesson 1, what is the stock market? Lesson 2, history of the stock market. Lesson 3, how to go up, how to go down, whatever. So it kind of like
How to
even though
spell
the
stock market, all those.
even though the expert knows it all, he can just tell you exactly, and he can use all the complicated terms right at the beginning. He doesn't do that. He hides those in order to provide some context to build out your knowledge as a newbie, and then he reveals everything. So this is the same to say about God, whether it's like this 10 utterances or in other ways as well.
Right. So exactly, we get to interact with him on different levels, as we said before, like Be'el Shaddai Nodati Lahem, right? Even God is interacting with the forefathers and Moses in different levels of interaction.
Yeah, like
Yeah, you were going to say?
yeah. So like, well, like Pardis, right? So Pardis is different, is itself different levels. So you have Peshat, which is having a simple relationship to God. Peshat is a simple interpretation of Torah. Then you have Darash, which is the more complex and overacting. Then you have the deepest, which would be Sod, the mystical like interaction with Torah.
Right. So, I mean, correct. And again, without getting too deep into like what each one of those levels means, right? So we're being told like there's obviously like there are these multiple levels, and we are being invited to interact with God in all these levels. But it comes with warning. Like I'm sure you've already interacted with ideas like this in Tanya, Klipat Noga, Future Achra, right? So these are but these are dense topics. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so another one of these nice. Is that it? Can you scroll down a little more?
There is a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah, but not okay. 10 דורות מאדם ועד נוח, להודיע כמה ערך אפיים לפניו, שכל הדורות היו מכעיסין ובאין עד שהביא אליהם את מי המבול. 10 דורות מנוח ועד אברהם, להודיע כמה ערך אפיים לפניו, שכל הדורות היו מכעיסין ובאין עד שבא אברהם אבינו וקיבל שכר כולם. Go ahead, Kirk.
There were 10 generations from Adam to Noah. This is to teach us the extent of God's tolerance for all these generations angered him, until he brought upon them the waters of the flood. There were 10 generations from Noah to Abraham. This is to teach us the extent of God's tolerance for all these generations angered him, until Abraham came and reaped the reward for them all.
Right. So, what's interesting over here, again, we're talking about like these 10, but if the previous one, we talked about the 10 utterances and like we know what they are, sort of. Here it's sort of like the 10 dorot, the 10 generations. It's almost like not going into detail. It's almost like as if it's telling you like it wasn't really important, like sort of what happened in between those. If in contrast we have Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai Umsara Yoshua L'Skinim. Here it's like there is this 10 generations, which it comes up to be like a little over 1,000 years or so. Yeah. Okay, and we know there's a very dramatic pasuk where Hashem basically sees that all the humans are doing is evil all the time, and I'm done with this. Excuse me for a second. Sorry. Which in a certain sense is, which in one second. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
This is a dramatic verse. That
right, yes, a dramatic verse about God, seeing how evil the world was. I was going to say that's sort of like the opposite, the negative of like he saw the world was good. Like there's this freedom that we talked about, like this free will, sort of for the world to sort of form itself once God sort of created it. So here too, you see while he was happy with the formation of, let's say, the light, and during his creation times, you could see here the formation of humanity and its interaction with nature. He was not happy with, right? Yeah. He's looking at this and saying like this code has gone rogue, so to speak. It is and the land was full of evil, wickedness, a lot of robbery, as we learn. So this
idolatry.
Is not I'm sorry?
Idolatry.
Less so idolatry, actually, but there is idolatry, of course, but that's not what it was more about the interactions between them, exactly, them and each other, and nature as well. we've spoken about, but just because this comes up, it's always good to go over it again. How during that period there were different points where there was like a hope for a savior, right? Where we have Enoch, Chanoch that comes first, and we said how his name, like Noach, also comes from a place of chinuch, of education, not just like nechama, but to teach. With Enoch, with Chanoch, it did not work out because he sort of stayed in the mountain. He was too holy. He couldn't interact with the people, so they couldn't benefit from him. And ultimately, God comes and says, in a spooky sense, that he walked with God, and God takes him up with him, basically.
So this year, this is I don't know if I'm getting the term right, but this is apocrypha, right? This Chanoch is like you're taking this from the book of Chanoch, which is not in the canon.
Not
right?
canon.
No, I'm taking this right now from well, two different things.
I'm asking because I don't necessarily know.
The fact that Chanoch exists, that we have in our tradition.
Okay.
Then, as far as like Chanoch turning it to Metatron or all those things, yes, that already is Svarim Chitzoniim.
Okay.
I'm giving you things that like I've seen mentioned through the sages of Israel right now, as in still within the tradition where I feel comfortable to talk about this, like in our Pirkei Avot class, as part of the tradition, which is he was disconnected from the people, and God, as a favor to him, was like, this model didn't work. Like, great, you're super holy, and you get me, but you don't know how to interact with the people, so you got to go.
Right.
And then again, you have this with Noah, where again we try to have an interaction with the people, but here too there is this doesn't work out either, and there unfortunately here too is
right. He doesn't save anybody really, except
Sorry?
his family. He doesn't. Noach doesn't save anybody except for his family. Like nobody shows up, nobody believes him, or
well. Also, I mean, ultimately, then there's Moses, which he does the tikkun. He corrects for where Noah went wrong. You could see this in the fact that
Abraham.
Well, Abraham also does that. There's a lot. I mean, Abraham is parallel to Bilam, and also Moses is parallel to Bilam, and Abraham is also parallel to Lot. And you could use these people in a certain sense, like they're interchangeable in some aspects. Specifically with Moses is also confronted by God, right? God goes to Noah and says, "No, I'm going to destroy the earth." Noah doesn't say, "Please save everyone." He says, "Me and my family." Noah saves them, but that's a fail.
right.
When it comes to Moses, he says, "Moses, I'm going to destroy everyone. I'm going to start again with you." When it comes to the Israelites, and Moses comes and says, "No, erase me from your book if you're going to do that."
Right.
So I was watching a lecture from Rabbi Skobak about why God chose Abraham over Noah, and Rabbi Skobak said the reason was for the reason you just mentioned, because Noah said, it doesn't matter, the people are so corrupt, give up on them. But Abraham was like, no, if I am given direct revelation, if my nation of people are going to be righteous, they're going to set an example for others.
So right, so he's doing that with connection to Sdom, right, where he also stands up to God over there. So yes, there's that parallel as well. However, his life is not in danger necessarily, and in the Moses story, it's his life. Also, the Zohar does this connection between Mei Noach, the waters of Noach, and the waters of Moshe, which Moshe is very involved dealing with water from being himself inside a teva, right? We use the same term. The Moses is inside a teva as well. The whole story of Moses has many parallels to the creation story. So again, this is sort of like creation 2.0, and we're trying again with like another version of this. However, and it also says in Moses, Matzachen Beinei Hashem, that Moses was God saw him kindly. However, we see no point where God tells that to Moses directly, but we do know that God tells that to Noah directly. He says Matzah Bechen. So there too, the Zohar does that comparison between those two verses. But that's a little tidbit. Also the fact that Noah himself is Motzeh Chen. Some people interpret that as like a bad thing, like that's a lower level of being recognized by God, because ultimately there's Sheker Achen. Chen only goes so far, and it also says Tzaddik B'nei Elohim, as in he was righteous in the eye of God, but again, in the reading of Elohim being like a lower level of revelation of sort of God being nature.
Mm-hmm.
And he was not recognized as a tzaddik in the eyes of the Tetragrammaton, as the eyes of Eheyeh, the God, the agentic God that's just talking to Moses. So here too, it's again on a lower level. And just one more note about Abraham: both Enoch and Noah walk. God walks before them, or they walk on the side of God. Either way, they're both either requiring to be pushed along or walk hand by hand. Abraham walks in front of God. He's not waiting for God to tell him to be moral. He is running ahead and doing so on his own will. And that's why God says, that's the guy I'm interested in. Someone that didn't need me pushing him to do this, rather was doing this himself.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Specifically, the pasuk says also because he's planning to teach this to his kids.
Yeah.
Right. So God also said, I found someone that's not just, again, not like an Enoch that's in the mountain, but just connected to me, rather someone that's interested to pass this on. So now we were saying again, just now that we went through that whole context, which is Lo Dia Kama Er Chapayim. Why did we have these 10 generations after we just went about saying how they basically weren't worth it, and almost Noah wasn't worth it. So it was to show how patient God was. That's what the Mishnah tells us, like off the bat, right? God, in a certain sense, also wanted to sort of wait and see what was going to come out of this. In a certain sense, he wants to see what's going to be. You also have here, so again, going back for a moment, we have Cain and we have Seth. We have these two lineages, and what our sages teach us is Cain comes up with music and technology and culture, and this is to represent like the achievement of man in a certain sense, from like a physical perspective almost. And Seth was there from the wisdom point of view, right? Is more cerebral, and this is supposed to be connecting to God in a certain sense. And there is an interpretation when we talk about the sons of God and the daughters of men. While some people took a look at that interpretation as angelic forms and human forms, some people look at that interpretation as Homo sapiens.
Was it the sons of?
I'm sorry.
You said the sons of God and the daughters of men.
Yes.
So what was the interpretation?
So I was going to say in Genesis, in Genesis, there's a story about how the sons of God and the daughters of men, they interact and procreate. I was giving some context about saying that who these sons of men and daughters of men, there are different interpretations. Some say they're angelic forms. Some say they're, like I was saying, I was giving a more scientific, historical point of view, that it could be a Homo sapien and a Neanderthal. However, right now, in this context, I'm going to say that the interaction is the sons of God are the sons of Seth from that lineage, which are like the more spiritual tribe. The daughters of men are there to represent the lineage of Cain. And the idea was, can they interact together? Can they create now a new form? And when the Torah tells us they get together, and they have their offspring are called the Giborim, the heroes. Okay? Now, there's an interpretation that a few, like 3 or 4 verses after that, we are told that Noah had Shem, Cham, V'Yefet. The sages say that Noah is from the line of Seth, and his wife was from the line of Cain. So the heroes that we were being told about a few verses earlier are the mix of Cain and Seth, with our Shem, Cham, V'Yefet. And that's why the world could be destroyed. We finally have a new model, which is the heroes, which created this synthesis of Cain and Seth. And that's why God says, now that I have this family of Noah and this new model, I could destroy the world.
So you just need the seed. Protect the seed.
Protect the seed.
Yeah. I'm gonna need that on a graph, I think, like on a visual graph. Like,
I'll just do it
lineage.
again. Go through it one more time, or
No.
okay.
No, I think I get it, but yeah, it's interesting. It's tough to think about, but it's interesting.
There's a lot a lot. 1 second, Kirk. There's a lot to dive into the whole Toledot.
Yeah.
Really,
Right.
all those stories, which they're fascinating. What was going on there at the time? Again, there's different interpretations or different levels of this, but I'm just as Beksama's leg, as they say. Yeah, go ahead, Kirk.
Well, I don't know how tangential this is, but I did read somewhere that the Vilna Gaon in the Gra, Rav, I believe was Eliyahu Kramer, said that the purpose of man's creation is to perfect his midah, his attributes, parallel to God. And I don't know how related to this is the idea that Seth was interested in becoming a more godly man and perfecting his midah, and Cain was more material.
Yes,
both,
however, what God wants is a synthesis, right? He wants you to use the material that he created to elevate towards God.
This is like the lonely men of faith as well. Like Adam
Exactly.
Kadmon. So at least the lonely men of faith. I don't know if it maps onto Adam Kadmon as
I understand you're just doing that like that separation over there. Okay. And then we had the 10 generations from Noah to Avraham. להודיע כמה ערך אפיים לפניו, שכל הדורות היו מכניסין ובאין עד שבא אברהם וקיבל שכר כולם. Right? So he takes this all on. So here too, we see the generations are also not worthy. However, we see that that Abraham comes, and because Abraham has like this, in a certain sense, it's, well, again, there's different interpretations. Some want to come and say that why is this generation not being destroyed? Because there was some good in them, and Abraham sort of took all that was good from them until that point, and that's why he manages to protect them all in a certain sense, because he managed to extract all the worthy gold, the worthy holy sparks from them. Now, people have asked, but what are the good values that people had at that time? Like, what can we get? This is quite controversial, but this is something that we spoke about a little, Ben, about how at that time, sacrificing one's child, which was going on at that time, in a certain sense, it does show some sort of understanding of how everything is all God. And ultimately, the greatest gift I could give back is the totality of myself. And we spoke about how, with regards to Isaac, during Akedat Yitzchak, right, during the sacrifice of Isaac, the difference between Isaac and Avraham, where they were, and the fact that Isaac was also willing to give up from himself, and he sees himself then as totally representative of the attribute of din, right? And one is to recognize that, like, ultimately I need to give back myself, right? And that goes all to what we said about Modani, right? Recognizing who I am, and ultimately the fact that I'm a gift from God. So there was a certain sense, like I said, about the Klipat Noga, where here too there was a kernel of truth over there. The fact that these people were so willing to give them all of themselves to God, there was something there. So I'm just giving an example of like what in horrible idol worship maybe Abraham saw and managed to elevate and raise. Of course, on the flip side, there are people who say that there was nothing there. And the thing is that the theological and religious exploration Abraham was doing, and the fact that he was saving some of the souls, like we said, it's a nefesh asher asa b'charan. There's this group that he, or even before Lech Lecha, that he was already teaching about monotheism. So the fact that Abraham was so great at his job, it really was enough to cover all the other generations and make sure that they were kept safe. There's also a Zohar. Some of them call him Achot Ktana, the little sister, what we hear in Shir Shirim and Song of Songs. But Achot Ktana is, they take the word Achot, sister, and in Hebrew, it's Achot is like Ichui or Achva, it's bringing people together. So here too, Abraham was known as like the little sister that welded everyone together.
Yeah, it's interesting, like the controversial take that you quoted, that you talked about, in terms of how that was something that, like, there's a kernel of truth in the aspect of people that were willing to sacrifice. almost seems to me like that's connected to kind of like this shita of חנוך את הילד לפי
Darko.
דרכו. Right? Kind of like did the Rambam say about like sacrifice being something that was used in order to teach us something?
Yes. According to the Rambam specifically, he felt that he gives the background how it starts. The reason we do korbanot is because this was a practice of idol worship. However, to transition a people so dramatically is going to be too difficult.
Right.
There needs to be some sort of vehicle, which, by the way, we see echoings of this in even with God's words himself. He tells them, Masachat kesef, he says, V'zahav lo ta'asun lachen, right? He says that you guys can't make it, but God excludes himself. And the following portion, we are being commanded to build this crazy thing called the ark that has on it 2 cherubs, right? So this clearly is an example of cultural appropriation or taking some sort of vessel, which clearly after the golden calf, God and Moses recognized that like these humans require more, more mediation.
Yeah, it's like it's this aspect of almost like it's like teach the boy according to his way, teach the
according to his
child
needs.
according to his needs, and also this sense of compromise. I was discussing this with somebody before. It's kind of connected to the book club as well, but like this compromise. This might be too tangential, but like with the goat, the scapegoat, there's some sense of compromise where you have to give a little bit, but in order to subdue that. So even with Akedat Yitzchak, it's like giving a little bit in order to transform the act itself, and then you just go away from it.
So another country,
I mean, this is the aspect of this is the same idea, the same thing that maybe Jordan Peterson talks about in terms of like sending out, like you think through an idea before you do it. You send out some kind of this virtual idea, and then you let that die, and then but you can figure out the right way.
1000%, and the Ramban. Has also a very shocking understanding, reading, interpretation of the Seir LaAzazel. And in one of them, it's even recognizing that Azazel is this entity, right? Because some people call it a mountain, but recognizing it's an entity and saying the only time, like we said in the Noahide class, how yes, God recognizes with regards to, let's say, the rest of the world, that there are other powers and principalities out there, so to speak, under God's rule, but let's say that have their own sort of power, obviously not really that they can't do what they want, but they're under God's rubric. Mm-hmm. It's not relevant for the Jews. Having said that, once a year, God says, I'm allowing you to go out to the fridge and meet and recognize that there is evil out there. And you need to go and extra sacrifice something to it, which is but it's only happening through the commandment of God, as in like you're only doing this quote unquote idol worship only through the permission of God. So then it no longer idol worship. It's more recognizing that like there's parts of me that I need to send out to the fringe that could die, that I need to get rid of. And there's also a sense of you recognizing it's not all roses. At some point you need to contend and interact with evil out there.
Yeah, and it's also about this world and its consequences. Meaning, and like how when sometimes when things are in process, you have to deal with the consequences. And the example that I have in mind for that is the final plague, the Bechorot.
Yeah,
where God tells, I don't remember it exactly, but God tells, or Moses tells the people to not stay outside. I heard this commentary about this, not stay outside, because there's going to be evil forces that are just, if you're outside, even though, shouldn't God know that they're Jewish and you shouldn't hurt them? But if you stay outside, it will get you. So stay inside. Do what you need to do to protect yourself, and let the forces do what they need to do. So there's also the sense of consequences where you have to do something in order to avoid them.
I think that's it's very deep what you're saying, and you could see it also in a certain sense echoed. Moses in a crazy scene after he meets Pharaoh for the first time. Oh, Kirk left us. All right. After he meets Moses for the Pharaoh for the first time, he tells Pharaoh what's up, and then Pharaoh basically says, "Forget this, and now I'm doubling, your amount of workload."
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes to God and says, like, "Why? Like, what's your deal? Like, look what you're doing. Look what your intervention is doing." And this is also after God is telling him, "Look, for the forefathers, they knew me as El Shaddai, and the interpretation is like they didn't see me keep my promises yet. And now you're going to see me like God is saying like I'm actively entering the arena right now. I'm coming into history right now, and things are going to get crazy." Now, so Moshe comes and says like, "Well, you're getting involved, and look what's happening. The first thing that happens are problems."
Yeah.
And in a certain sense, God is, and we could look at this even today. God entering the arena doesn't mean there isn't consequences, and it doesn't mean that in sort of like a U-shaped version, it doesn't mean that there first isn't like a downhill, or that doesn't mean that like now that you're starting to resist, it's all going to be roses suddenly. Mm-hmm. So we even have to understand this ourselves as someone that believes that like, we're in the days of redemption, that even what we're dealing with right now this doesn't mean like, how have we been abandoned? It could also mean that like this is what looks like intervention in the middle, and there's consequences. There's consequences for those things. So I hope we stand victorious at the end. Okay, let's move on to the next.
Yeah.
No, what's Gimel?
Gimel, this is Gimel here. Do you have anything?
No, scroll back up. No, we just did this one, Bet, and now it's under that. Gimel, this one.
Yeah.
No, now you're in Dalet.
Am I? Does it show you Dalet?
Number 4. A little higher up. Now I'm seeing Gimel.
Interesting. Okay, so that doesn't correspond to what I have.
Okay. Asara. No, I see nothing. Okay. Asara.
Let me share this again. I don't know. I was a little.
Sure.
It was a little flaky on us because it wasn't corresponding to what I had. So let's try it again. And you got Gimel here?
Yep.
Nice.
10 ניסיונות נשא אברהם אבינו, ועמד בכולם להודיע כמה חיבתו של אברהם אבינו. Nice and sweet. In short, with 10 tests, our father Abraham was tested, and he withstood all of them, in order to make known how great was our father Abraham's love for God, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. God's love for him, potentially in a certain extent. So these 10 trials, which there's like in classic Jewish form, there's a dispute what all of them are, but it's Sarah being taken down to Egypt, the circumcision, fighting the 4 kings, the sacrifice of Isaac, getting rid of, kicking out Ishmael, taking Hagar as a wife and then getting rid of her, Lech Lecha, like the famous, like, actually go on for yourself. I think some say there was like the famine he had, the fact that he had to, not the 4 kings. Then there's a midrash that he was thrown into the fire kiln. There's a midrash that he is, there's a midrash that when he was like much younger, he had to hide for like 13 years from like these rulers in Haran that were after him. So that list, you could decide which. I think in some Sidurim today they have like the different lists that they offer. Needless to say, he went through a lot. Mm-hmm. His resume was like a good resume, a lot of different stuff happening. And Avram is a perfect example, one of the main examples of Maaseh Avot Siman Levanim, right? That we have like this fractal pattern that repeats itself constantly. So we look at Avram and the way he did things. So the Asara Nisyonot is also sort of to show that these trials also showcased who he was and his attributes, and that gave us those how Jordan Peterson calls it, those meta truths, like those truths that like you could learn like a tremendous amount from. They're fundamental truths or fundamental ideas that we could learn from as well. As we said before about how important 10 is, 10 is also to show that it's not by chance, right? It wasn't that like God by accident picked him, but like no, there was like again and again and again. So really show that he was very interested in this. It's Yitzchak and Yaakov, Jacob and Isaac don't have these 10 trials, but again, this is the origin story in a certain sense for the nation of Israel, and that's why seemingly there would be the most amount of pushback. So we want to stress the point of how worthy he was off the bat, right? So we're going to give him like these 10 trials, which to show that not only is he worthy, but Israel itself, who he's symbolic of, is like an Am Sgula, right? Like it's been tested and tried, and it has what it takes to for the marathon, for the long 3,000, 4,000 year story. And the pasuk, the Mishnah stresses over here that lehodia, right, to sort of announce, so that the world should know, in one sense, that we're letting on the exterior, we're letting everyone out there know. There's a sense where it's on the interior to mankind, in a certain sense, that people should know for themselves that they can persevere, right? You could handle many, many challenges and still come out successful and still come out a believer.
Yeah.
Look at Abraham, and he's managed to do this many times. By the way, this is echoed again, obviously, in the trials that Hercules has as well. You could see he has these
different trials.
This gives them exactly.
And I watched the movie. I loved it.
What movie?
The animated.
Is there the 10 trials in the animation, the Disney one?
I think there are the
He fights the Hydra. He fights. There's a scene where he fights the Nemean lion, which I think in the movie is Scar. They take Scar from Lion King, and he's wearing him in a certain scene.
One of the horse, whatever you call that one.
Pegasus, right? He gets him differently though, but Nicha, I'll accept.
Did you used to play the game too? Was that big in your time?
What game?
The Hercules game. That was based on animation.
I'm just thinking about the song. I know he fights the harpies in the song. You see that for a second. Song called Zero for Hero, and he fights this crazy warthog that's also there.
Right.
I don't know if they're all there, but some of them are there. You're
now
correct.
I need to play that game.
Wait, was it a game based off the Disney movie?
Yeah, it was kind of like it wasn't a 2D game, but yeah, it was like it was a game based on it. And you would go through like an obstacle course.
So I remember that when Lion King came out.
Yeah, that one is a 2D. I remember that, I think.
Yeah, so I remember that. That was
I think it was in the computer in our school even.
Right. I mean, if it was in your school, then you had Jazz the Jackrabbit, right? I'm sure that was there at some point.
Yeah, I think so.
There's Bubbles, there's Fox, Commander Keen.
I had that. Did you have that bear, the doobie that you build a house for? That's like for like kids. That was like really.
I remember Gordy that you'd have to call in and you could play with your phone. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one. Wow, that was all. Okay, I actually had a question about Avram, not Gordy.
Yeah,
but the one thing that comes up here is about the nisayon, because obviously we say don't put me. Look, we ask God.
I'll send us anyway. Right, we say veloy de nisayon, right? When we pray, don't test me.
Yeah, but we also say that these tests show how great Avram is. So what's our relation to tests? Are we saying don't test me, but like maybe give me an easy test so that I can show you?
I think when we pray for not being tested, we're asking specifically, don't test me where I'm weak. That doesn't mean, but like that's where you should be tested. But the attitude is like, test me in a sense where, like, yes, I don't mind that life could be difficult, but like, if you know, like, I'm a coke addict and like I don't want to wake up in the morning, there's going to be like free cocaine today, like that's going to be like, don't take me there. And you could also interpret don't test me to give me the strength to not be tempted.
Yeah.
Right. So God obviously understands each one what he needs. I'll just add another interesting idea to think of, again, which has to do with hello Jacobim, with regards to letting.
Why are you offering people free cocaine on my channel?
I thought you were going to offer any kind of like new games as well that you played that you want to share with us.
Yeah, so it's the fact of Lehodia, and we said the option of showing it to the world based on these nisyonot. So there's a famous, I don't know how famous it actually is, but we say Acharat Varim Elu Nisa Elohim et Avraham, after these things. So some ask, what are these things? So there are some that interpret that these things are Yitzchak and Yishmael were having a conversation, and Yishmael is going to Yitzchak. He's saying, little boy, you think you're a big deal. You got your circumcision when you were born, right? You had no say in it, and it just happened to you. I did it when I was much older, and that was like a much bigger level of commitment. So, like, I really should take the lead. This is like when they're on the way up, right? He goes with the Shtei Ne'arim. Some say it was Yishmael and Elazar, and each one of them potentially could have been the successor of Avraham. Yeah. So comes Yitzchak and says, you think the circumcision's a big deal? I will sacrifice myself. I'll give all myself to God. And then the next line is, so here too, this was in a certain sense to show the world how Yitzchak and in a certain sense Avraham, how much their love for God and how much they're willing to sacrifice for God as well. Right. One more interesting story which has to do with this is, so King David comes to God and says, it's not fair that it's Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, and Elohei Yaakov. Why do just the forefathers get to have your name with them? Like God's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Why is it not also the God of King David? So God says, because you weren't tested like them. They were tested and they pulled through. So David tells God, test me. And God gives him the test of Bathsheba, and he fails. He can't, which he then goes to Nathan, of course, which is a beautiful moment of repentance. But the idea was that there was something very special about the three patriarchs, which they are Hen, HaMerkava. They create the chariot. They create the throne in a certain sense of God. And while David is King David and has all the malchut that has to do with him, nevertheless, he couldn't be the Merkava, not at that point, not when we're talking about those hyper truths, those first versions of the Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim.
Yeah.
Jacob, do you want to join? Say something? Thoughts? Ideas?
I mean, when we talk about Hen HaMerkava, I mean, obviously David is also one of the 7 shepherds, so.
Yes, correct. So that's what I'm saying. So like David's still like, he's all good. You know what I mean? Like he made it in, he's in the big leagues. My point being in that example, but he wasn't part of Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. Yes. King David will forgive me. Now I'm nervous at 120. He's going to be waiting for me there, being like, what's up? Okay. Let's do this last one. What do you say, Ben?
Yeah, I'm good for it.
So Dalit, how about you give it a read?
Yes, 10 ניסים נעשו לאבותינו במצרים, ו10 על הים. 10 מכות הביא הקדוש ברוך הוא על המצריים במצרים, ו10 על הים. 10 ניסיונות ניסו אבותינו את הקדוש ברוך הוא במדבר, שנאמר, וינסו אותי זה 10 פעמים, ולא שמעו בקולי.
Right. So, there's.
Do you want to go for the English first?
Yeah. Sure. Go ahead. Good. Take it away.
10 miracles were performed for our forefathers in Egypt, and another 10 at the sea. 10 afflictions were wrought by God upon the Egyptians in Egypt, and another 10 at the sea. With 10 tests, our forefathers tested God in the desert. As this said, Numbers 14:22, they tested these 10 times and did not hearken to my voice.
Right. So first off, interesting to see. You could ask yourself. You could wonder why the double up seemingly in the beginning, right? And the contrast over here is one is miracles and one is the makot. And the reason is because the plagues were afflicting the Egyptians. However, as we know, they were not afflicting the Jews. So much so that the Midrash says that if they were sharing a bath, like half would be water and half would be blood. And if they had darkness, like they would. So again, to stress how the Israelites were not affected by this, excluding what you said, Ben, about like the consequences of don't go outside your house during Makat Bechorot, right? They had to mark their house. But the idea was that was a miracle for them over here as well. And again, like we talk about the 10 things that the 10 things that happened to them on the sea here too, and the 10 things that happened in Egypt. The split is usually the 10 things that happened in Egypt were for the people of Egypt and Pharaoh, and that is part of the exodus of Egypt itself. Less to do with removing the Israelites from Egypt, more doing to removing that deterministic mind frame and that theological mind frame that the Egyptians have. And you could see this coming about when ultimately Pharaoh says, Chatati ani ve'ami. And why does he say Chatati ani ve'ami? Because he himself realizes, after Makat Barad, after hail, when he realizes that he's completely overwhelmed by this,
right?
This cracks his idea that I myself am a god, right? Chatati, I was wrong how I saw myself, and if I was wrong how I saw myself, me, my culture, my whole people, doesn't even talk about specific Josh or specific Bob, which were common Egyptian names. Rather, he's talking about the whole idea that the Egyptians had was mistaken. So that's on the Makot that were specifically in Egypt. The 10 Makot on the Yam, that is more to show God's subduing nature in a certain extent. And that was more for the Israelites to see. Now,
what is the Makot Alayam? What does it refer to? Because I've never heard that. Makot Alayam, like the... Oh, we lost it. This was too heavy of a question, I think. You're muted.
Where did Chezi go? Come back.
Yeah.
So
I can't hear you. 1 second. Again?
I was asking about the Asara Makot Alayam.
Jacob, what were you saying?
I was about to say that there is this idea that when the Egyptians were brought into the sea, right, and then the water came in on them, there were various miracles that were made in which Egypt was punished at that moment.
Okay.
If you read the Haggadah, this is in contradiction with the Haggadah that goes into, there was 200 Makot, there was 50 and 50. There's all different kind of calculations, how they read the Psukim of what went down over there. But there were other miraculous things happening as well.
Yeah.
There was the Muda Esh that was protecting them from, on the Yam, the fact that it split to 12 different different openings. So there's different nisim that happened over there. The fact that it took out all the gold at the end from and gave it to the Israelites. So different miracles that were happening there at the time. I should mention, though, that in this Mishnah, if you count them together, there's like a whole game being played over here, which is if you read, it's 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, you end up getting to 40 over here. And then this talks about there are the 4 that have to bring a korban todah. The 4 that have to bring a korban todah to Beit HaMikdash are someone that was sick, and someone that was captive, someone that traveled across the sea, and someone that across a desert. So we have over here that the Israelites are going across the sea, and the Israelites are going across the desert, and they were captive inside Egypt, and they were sick, and it says Hashem said like that he healed us from Egypt as well. So they're playing on this as well. So the 40 things over here have to do with the fact that these 4 individuals have to bring a sacrifice korban olah to the temple. Along with this korban olah was 40 different pieces of bread that they would have as well. Now you might ask, Chezi, that's crazy for someone to eat 40 pieces of bread. And that's why the Torah wants one being thankful to do a communal thing. So if you're going to bring 40 pieces of bread, you're obviously going to bring hummus. And if there's hummus, someone's going to bring other people. And next thing you know, you have a chafla, everyone's eating, cracky jokes, TLC, chatting. It's great.
Like to do a fashat challah is a crazy amount of dough. It's not gonna. It's
right. So you have a challah party, and that's why today we no longer bring korban ha'olah. Today we do birkat hagomel in synagogue, even though I disagree with saying it while flying, but I'm not a rabbi. And the point is, so here again, you could see that little game of the 40 pieces of bread have to do with the 10, 10, 10, and how the korban todah, the individual that has these 4 different trials, really encompass the whole experience that the Israelites had in Egypt. So in beautiful chazal, in brilliant chazal fashion, they have managed to weave the old and I guess at that time the contemporary and wave it all together. For ourselves, of course, we should recognize that these miracles are happening every day in our life. And these are things that we're not bringing 40 breads and we don't have to necessarily go to the temple, but we should stop and be thankful for the things that God is doing for us. And we should recognize how we should be sharing that with the other people in our life as well, to recognize how great God is and recognize that whether it's the 10 things that Abraham went through or the 10 commandments or the 10 things, again, the idea is that there is constant shefa, there's constant osher being shined upon us, and we have access to that if we only learn how to orient ourselves properly, sanctify ourselves, and level up.
Well, that's why Jews recite Birkat Hamazon before eating bread, right? Or after eating bread.
That's why Jews say Birkat Hamazon before. Yes, as one of the Shittot. Even though the Buddhists rub their food before they eat as well, the idea is to stop and recognize, as the kids say today, touch grass. You know what I mean? You have to go and see and feel and understand and connect and recognize that, as we say, Se'u enecha lamarom u're'u mi bara ele, right? Look at the universe and ponder and wonder, or like God tells Job, where were you when I created the universe? And these are things that we ultimately, as we discussed in the past, once we say Modeh Ani, we recognize all of that. And
right, be in the moment, feel the universe. Exactly.
I mean, this goes back to right now we have my banner in the back, but my brand in the back, but Jacob's Tetragrammaton and his beautiful, what's that man called that Da Vinci made? The Vitruvian Man? You know what I'm talking about?
No,
I know. I'm trying to think of I know there is a name for it, but I'm just giving it right. Jacob's man. So there is a sense where we could really be that person. We could really be our full potential.
And there is an idea that the Shabbat table, or even, the Kabbalists talk about any meal is Sha'at Milchama, right? There's a spiritual war, and there's a spiritual likeness of meals to the Beit HaMikdash, right? That I think it's Chazal who say that Mishacharav Beit HaMikdash, since the Beit HaMikdash has been destroyed, we have the Shabbat table as a mizbeach,
and that's why every teacher in school would always tell kids, get off the table. It's a mizbeach. And you're like, oh, right. Of course. It's a mizbeach that I have gum under. It's a mizbeach that I wrote on top of. This mizbeach is missing 2 legs. It's a mizbeach in our school. So yes, but obviously that's the right mindset to have. And there is a nice little midrash that we say that on Friday night when we welcome the angels and we sing Shalom Aleichem, which either we say the four verses, some say them each 3 times, some don't. Either way, we say that there are the Malachei Shalom and Malachei Chabala, right? That we have the evil inclination angels, and we have the good deeds angels, and they're watching us, and they're seeing the interaction around the altar. And while we're singing, if they see a house that is unified, a house that is sanctified, a house that is properly oriented, the angels of good deeds, of shalom, of peace, they make a blessing that it will be like this next week. And the evil angels have to bow their head and recognize this to be true. And they also say, Amen. So this will be true. And on the flip side, if it's devastation, if it's chaos, if there's anger, if there's jealousy, they come and say, it will be like this next week. And the angels of peace have to bow their head and say, and so it will be done. So again, this is just to echo the fact that our actions, our deeds, our words, they shape our surroundings. I think we'll end over there, but no one has to go anywhere. People can interact, ask questions.
How's your day, Jacob?
My day is okay. Life has been weird. Rabbi Yitzchak on the Discord was actually looking into your question regarding Noahides and king cake. If you want to,
what's the question?
Oh, it was silly. Just if whether or not Noahides can celebrate Mardi Gras, because I'm from New Orleans.
Generally speaking, first of all, well, if it's food that there's a difference between if it's food that is specifically for idol worship. I don't know what you're talking about right now.
It's not for
right, so we're specifically talking about king cake, which is what Rabbi Yitzchak was asking about. Because
what's king cake?
Yeah, that's the question.
If you're saying king and you're asking a question, is it king being Jesus?
Well, so the king cake is eaten on Mardi Gras, and traditionally it's a Catholic holiday, like to celebrate Jesus. But I mean, almost nobody actually celebrates it as a religious holiday, at least not in my family.
So
I know
referred to are the 3 kings who come to see baby Jesus, and they bake a little plastic doll of Jesus into the cake, and the person who gets that piece of cake, it's supposedly lucky or something.
By the way, why didn't those 3 kings just let everyone know?
Good question.
I'm just thinking about that right now. Why?
Yeah,
not
the story makes 0 sense.
Guess what? 3 of us came over here. We brought gifts. Also, by the way, do you ever think of selling those gifts, Joseph, and getting out of the manger and not having your son be a carpenter?
Okay. These are good questions to ask.
These are good questions.
Carpenter might have been a lucrative. Seems like a lucrative occupation.
I'm just saying when people are like,
no,
who are you? He should have been ask the 3 kings. They were really into me.
Yeah, actually, so the tecton they were basically, they just broke stones, right? Most of the people who were considered tectons were just people who were breaking stones. These were really, really poor people. And then the whole story with there's no prophet in his own town makes absolutely no sense if there were these 3 kings that came with these presents. The whole thing just doesn't work. But don't tell our Christian friends that.
Jacob,
Sherry is
are you a
here.
Jesus Methodist?
And she said they were warned by angels not to go back to Herod and let him know. All right. Sherry, I'm just saying, if that's fine, and I know they couldn't shoot an email, but once they were safe, they couldn't let some people know.
I need to go build a fireplace. Does anybody want to? If anybody wants a fireplace, let me know. I'm gonna become an expert today.
Oh, nice.
So
there's 1,000 YouTubes by people that are way too eager. 17 ways how to light a fire.
Yeah. But thank you, Chezi. I have to run out. That was my excuse for running out.
I'll see you next week, buddy. Thank you so much.
Chezi,
Okay.
I don't think I'll be able to join the Noahide stream tomorrow, but this was a good talk, and I really appreciate you for letting me join the Pirkei Avot streams.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you for participating and asking good questions. And it's good. If the more you want to learn, if I could assist, I'll be glad to. I
Can I
would
ask
just say,
one?
as far as the cake, though, if you really needed to, of course, there's wiggle room. You're under the age, quote unquote, where Noahide, like under the quote unquote Noahide bar mitzvah age in theory. And
what's the Noahide bar mitzvah age?
well, it needs to be decided based on the sages of that community. But generally speaking, Brit Olam says it being like, what are the age they're allowed to drink? What's the age they're allowed to drive? Like, what's culturally, when are they considered adults?
You should let Rabbi Yitzchak know because he's trying to find a heter for
Number one. Number two, the fact that it's not directly idol worship. Number three, the fact that you just said it's minhag avotem beyadem. They're not really doing it for idol worship anymore. It's more of a cultural thing. Having said that, its title and its connection to the day make it less than ideal. And unless you said, like, listen, the amount of pressure I'm going to have from my parents is so great, or someone who's going to be offended, then there's more room for leniency. However, if they don't mind and you don't need it, ideally you should stay away from that. That should be
that makes sense.
In the under the proper conduct version of Brit Olam.
Yeah, Noahides, to my understanding, are generally not expected to not do hukat hagoyim, like even if it has semi-idolatrous origins, so long as it's not practiced by idolatry.
No, a Noahide is not required not to do hukat hagoyim.
Yeah, so they're allowed.
He's definitely not obligated to. Again, but then you have to ask yourself these questions seriously. The more you learn, Kirk, and the more involved you are, it gets harder to claim ignorance, and it gets harder to claim, now again, you are always in a quote unquote a safe place of not being obligated to, but that's between you and the master of the universe. You have to start asking yourself how your relationship develops and what do you think he's expecting from you.
Yeah, and I'm trying to ask a lot of questions, and sometimes the questions are more important than the answers.
That's true. He definitely wants you to respect your parents, and he definitely doesn't want to strain your relationship with your parents either.
That's certainly true.
Mamash. Jacobin, talking about a different topic right now while we're still schmoozing. I saw a little of...
I saw that tomorrow Jacob's going to talk to a Chabad rabbi.
That's not what I was going to talk about, but sure. I did see that. I saw Mark's reaction to the TLC, and if Mark hears this, I don't mean to be talking about you, Mark. You're great. I'm not sending any shade at you. It's all good. But I saw his interaction and Father Eric's interaction about like the Peterson Center thing, and while I agree with and Father Eric spoke about it a little, what you and I were talking about, that there's the Christian TLC and there's a Jewish TLC, and isn't that aren't those opposing each other? And you were saying no, but there's a common goal that at least for now could still be working together. I am still I'm leaning towards you in this sense. And I also think it would be I think it would be a mistake to move away from the name TLC at this point.
Yeah. Hezi.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting question. So now that I read somewhere that scientists are figuring out that potentially women might be able to impregnate themselves with their own bone marrow, but would this present any halakhic problems with incest if they could because the egg would be contacting with the bone marrow sperm?
I don't know about that. And strangely enough, Bnei Noach actually have more leniency with regards to incense, but just it happens to due to technicality. What you're raising is just in general in biotech, are there going to be ramifications for halacha? Obviously, and in general, this is true about technology or biotechnology. There are going to be things that become, let's say, less relevant, and then there's a question: what is the spirit of the halacha? What does the Torah want us to do? Right? We are going to be in a future where we could all use our screens halachically on Shabbos, but do we want to preserve Shabbos? And we're going to have to move from a place of understanding that, yes, there's an option today to clone your baby or give yourself a child with wings. Is this what God intends us to do? Is this what we're supposed to be doing? And it's a real question.
Well, if the stone comes from her bone marrow and the eggs are from her, it could be like both the parents are related on both the sperm.
Kirk, you're
Who are the
talking,
parents?
like, okay, this whole discussion, it's like, it's oddity and not worth broadcasting. If you guys want to have this discussion, have it on the Discord in chat. You can have that. What you talked about, Chezi, I would like to continue discussing, but I think what's best is to end the Pirkei Avot stream and start a Just Chatting stream, and we can discuss that stuff because I think there's a bunch of people who want to talk about this stuff.
I'm
Kirk,
sorry, Jake. I was just
no need to apologize. Kurt, he's more upset at me for being just open to discuss any topic. You don't worry about your
open to discuss any topic, but and before we end the stream, so yes, Rabbi Dolphin, who is a well-known older emissary, one of the senior rabbis in Chabad, has a channel, and he is being very gracious with his time tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Los Angeles time, to come on for a few minutes, and that's already on the channel if people are interested, and we can have a discussion after this in a Just Chatting.
Sit there. So, Kirk, I'll see you next week. Anyone that watched or participated, thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week at the same time. And moving on with chapter
Jacob is just started just chatting.
We're gonna start just chatting after this. I'm just saying that, like I was just mentioning, chapter 5. We're moving through it quickly. They're not as dense as the other ones, and we'll be wrapping up. Then moving on to 6, and we will conclude Pirkei Avot and move on to other things. Catch you guys all on the flip.